Hey everyone, welcome back to what will undoubtedly be one of the last videos of building Hogwarts. We are very close to the end, and in fact, while I have cleared up most of the mess to the side, you guys can see what half of the mock is looking like at pretty much near completion. In fact, there's only one major thing missing on this side. Now, I am of course referring to the water around Hogwarts, or more specifically, the Black Lake. Now, for the longest time, it has just been blue base plates, and recently, I was able to do a little bit of work around the edges with the tiles that I had, and some of these trans clear plates in order to make it look like the foamy wash that's up against the rocks. But I did recently bite the bullet and purchase 1,600 1x2 light blue tiles. And that should hopefully, if I calculated it right, should hopefully cover all of this water area. Now, over on this side of the mock, you can kind of see it in that corner right there. The river, the stream that I did on the edge and the very front of the water is all tiled off, as is of course the edge here. But we are now going to spend what's probably going to be about an hour or so just painstakingly tiling this whole thing. But in terms of first impressions, especially at a convention, which this is going to be at, first impressions are everything, and the water is going to be a definite selling point. I already love how this looks right here, so I can't wait to see what it will be once we tile off this whole area. One thing I do hope I got right was the number of 1x1 tiles needed to complete this, because of course the majority of it is actual just 1x2 tiles, but once I get to the edge I'm going to need a 1x1 around every single other row. So if I run out of these, we're going to be in a decent bit of trouble. So I'm going to start with the areas that of course are the most visible, and I'm hoping of course it's going to cover everything, and then we're going to slowly work our way backwards. There are also areas, for example back there, where I do still need to do bits of the terrain, so I can use that to my advantage if I'm running short. But in any case, I'm just going to jump right into it, and I will update you on the progress as we go along to show you how this thing progresses. In case any of you were ever wondering, this little section that I did here is 100 tiles. That's what was in this bag. So you actually need quite a lot to do a lot of water. So I mean, this is what, a quarter of a half base plate. So it's an 8x16 plate, pretty much took 100 tiles. So far so good. We are getting a lot of progress done. We've used roughly about 500 tiles or so to fill up this side, which equates to about a base plate of actual tiles that I've laid down because there was already some existing. And it took about 15 to 20 minutes or so to get this done. So so far so good. And now we've got to shift our focus towards the main bit over there. And I might try to do something sort of like this, where you sort of lift up some of the tiles in order to just bring a little bit of interest to this central area, because yeah, it could very quickly become a little bit too plain, and I don't want that. Another thing I'd like to consider at this point is that I would love to put the Durmstrang ship, which I will just grab. I would love to put the Durmstrang ship somewhere like right there. However, you guys can also see how big it is and how much it actually blocks of the castle. So that'll really just be a last minute decision, because I do think it just adds so much. Maybe I can throw it over here on the edge, do something like that. Not terrible, but yeah, let's shift over here. Make sure to dust as well, guys, because there are so many little specks of debris in between all of these studs, and if you're going to tile it all off and get them stuck under there for a long time, it might be worth just spending a second and using your sleeve. And this is how far we've gotten with the next 500 piece bag. Almost completed this front section, apart from that little corner right there, which means we're doing pretty good. We've got one left, and of course the 1x1 tiles, which should get us through this and all that's back there and any other remaining areas of the mock that I might need. It's always good to have extra on hand as well, so I somewhat overestimated, but I'm okay with that. Another thing is I have been putting just a few of these raised tiles, if you will, just to add a little bit of interest. You can't really see them, if I'm being honest, but they're there. So we're just going to keep going, and soon the water will be finished, and it's looking so much better. Now, while I can't exactly say that this is 100% complete, because there are some bits that I haven't done yet, here is pretty much the finished water around Hogwarts, the Black Lake. It is so cool. I think it just, not gonna even bother explaining it. It just makes Hogwarts look good. It was a big investment, but I'm glad I did it because look how it's turned out. Now, in terms of what we need to keep going with, because I don't want to just stare at this for the rest of the video, this is all done. This bit is all done, which is great. I've done a little bit in front of the castle that was missing, and the last bit is here in front of the astronomy tower, which would meet up with that back corner over there. However, it's on a green base plate, and because I am most certainly not going to rip up everything to change the base plates, although technically that wouldn't be a terrible idea, I have got to figure out a way to make this blue so that it matches with over here, because this bit is going to have to be water, and then from about right here, it's got to be rockwork to line up with this side. So really what I'm going to have to do is spin this thing around, clear up this entire mess, slap the two bits together, and then I need to work on the water here and also the terrain around it. So I did in fact just switch the base plate color. It was actually probably one of the easier things I've had to done with this build. I just kind of scooted the mock off the table a little bit and ripped it off, and then quickly stuck this with my hand and slid it back onto the table, and then the weight of this basically pressed into the studs, which worked out great because now I have blue over here. I didn't turn this one around because I figured I could actually just count how many studs in the water and the rockwork is, which is what I've done. And I've started the rockwork over here filling up this section. There was obviously this big height difference between down there and up here, so I just filled it with some rock as well. And this is going to go essentially on the other side of this, just right here. So we're going to have to just make it look a little decent. It's probably one of the lesser viewed areas, but I still don't want it to be just plain studs. So gonna quickly plate it off and put some generic tiles and such and move on. Obviously do the water as well. So first things first, we were able to finish off this little section. Obviously it didn't take too much work, but it looks a lot better now, and obviously ties in with the rest of the water over here. And well, the next stuff is going to be a little bit shocking. I've ripped up most of the Hogwarts grounds over here, and this is simply just because I wasn't overly satisfied with how it looks, and obviously it's one of the main things that you see when you're first looking at the castle, and I think it's just not up to scratch. So I try to figure out the reason why that might be, and it was pretty much for two things. First of all the plants and trees were kind of just scattered about everywhere and looking a little bit ugly. And secondly, and most importantly, is the paths were all sitting on top of the green rather than underneath it as it normally would. So like the overgrowth on the side would start filling up the edges and it would sink down to the path as you normally see in real life. The reason why it was sitting on top was simply because I used to have these like that, and you obviously cannot fill in the gap between a curve, so I decided that'll just sit on top, and that's how I will get this circular central courtyard thing going on here. And as much as it did look like a central circular thing, I just didn't like how it turned out because it was just sitting on top of the grass, and that's not how it should look. So instead, I've gone ahead and ripped out quite a lot of the flooring, especially right here in the middle, and I'm replacing a lot of the green plates with dark tan, and then I'm just going to slowly start filling in the edges and try to make some semblance of a circle using plates. And it won't be exact, but I don't think it has to be. So it's going to just be a dark tan base like this, and then I'm going to sort of curve around all the corners, and obviously there's still going to be a fountain and everything in the middle, but it then allows me around all the paths to start doing more of this, and I will show you my sort of intentions with how this is going to look. So the idea is, for the most part, it will match this quite similarly. So obviously the grass is a lot higher than the original path, and then there's just lots of little slopes and tiles and such that slope down to it. And where the path needs to be higher than the grass, I will mitigate that by putting rocks and such. And I also quite like those 1x1 round tiles, which obviously is not a big deal, but it's something that I'll be wanting to include. Because if you can kind of see what that looked like in comparison to this, you can definitely say this is a lot more boring, and that's at the back. Whereas this is right at the front, so I want to make sure this is all looking really good. Now, essentially, above all else, I'm just trying to capture an aesthetic, and this is what I'm going off of. This is the concept art for the Hogwarts Legacy game. And, well, the main thing that you can notice is while there are trees, while there is foliage, it is much more rugged than, say, this. This just kind of looks very basic and curated, whereas this looks a bit more natural and just a little bit rough around the edges. And that's sort of the vibe of Hogwarts that I want to communicate, because even down to the actual castle itself, it's a lot pointier, and I don't want to say the word sleek, but it is a lot thinner and taller than, you know, squat and bulky. So I want to sort of reflect that in the grounds around it, because it's doing a very good job over here because it's quite high up. But as we suddenly basically go down towards base plate level, it's very easy for it to just look like flat lawns, and I do not want that to come across. I want it to feel like it's in the Highlands of Scotland. And we're also going to have to redo these trees simply because they're just pretty ugly and they don't look like pine trees at all. When I built them, I'm sure I just sort of did them more as filler, just to get an idea of what a forest would look like. And yes, they do work, but we want to make pine trees for this, and I think they want to be a decent bit taller than they currently are. So, I mean, they are about there, probably about up here. And the way to do it is just make it a lot fuller, a lot skinnier, a lot taller, similar to, you know, the actual castle itself. Another thing that I want to try to achieve with this is I'm going to shape it all with no grass, as in no foliage, no trees at all. And then, based on what I see, I'm going to selectively choose where to put a tree here and there. Because I had originally allocated this section to be the Forbidden Forest, but it's not really that big, especially when you put Hagrid's hut right here. So I don't want to take away from this area by putting trees just scattered everywhere so it starts blocking your view of something. I want it to accent the castle. So while this is a bit of a mess, I have completely overhauled this entire area. I'm going to try to show you a bit of what's going on. Under all of this, you can see that the path is now underneath the green and it's a little bit more rugged. Apologize for the noise as I move this. This is now what this center area is looking like, so obviously it's a lot less of a circle now, and just more of a general opening in the ground, but I do quite like how it's turning out. Here's a better view of what's that doing over there. I am slowly moving my way this way, and I'm almost done with just doing the general terrain. I'm going to then shift my attention to this area out the front, and once we've done that, I will give you an overview of what this whole area looks like, and then we'll get on to the details. Alright, so here's a better look at this area now that the mess is gone. You can see that it's much more rugged and kind of matching what we see on this side, as well as taking inspiration from over here. Now the details are obviously lacking at the moment. It's just the plates and obviously a few tiles and rock formations and such, but the idea of the courtyard is still in the same place. There's a path that goes to Hagrid's hut, but I think it looks a lot more finished. Obviously you can see that's what it used to look like compared to what it looks like now. Much more fan of this. I've yet to do this area, but you can also see the contrast here. This I won't rip up and do in the same fashion as this, simply because we would start to be getting underneath the castle foundations and such, and I don't want to be ripping any of that out. So we're just going to be working around this and trying to emulate this in such a way, using rocks, whatever, but mostly probably using foliage to cover this up. Cool, so this area is very basically done now. I've just obviously plated it and tiled it off as I've been doing everything else. The path is of course still on top of the green, but I think in some parts it does sort of mask over that fact, and it's not too bad. Now, what's going to really elevate this area is the foliage, and you can already see a glimpse of it here, but I've been experimenting with some new tree designs. So as a sort of direct comparison, here is the old trees, which well, this one's severely broken, but the idea was I had more spacing between each of the limbs, and that I would sort of overly stack the actual tree pieces themselves, so that it was really wide, and took up just a decent bit of area on the actual mock. But what I decided to do is, after a little bit of research online, is to try to make a little bit more of a distinct pine tree shape, which is what I've gone with here. And now all of these are, the good thing about it is I can literally shake it all about and this thing won't fall apart. The reason being is because and I don't know where I got these, but I've got these really long axle pieces, and they're kind of bendable, flexible. So what that means is that this tree is a bit bent, but it does mean that it's not going to fall apart on me, which for transport is a great thing. And then all of the tree limbs are either just actually attached in between all of these logs, and because obviously the axle is running all the way between it, it stays in place. Or for the wider sections or the most narrow sections, I'm using this piece right here, if it will focus, this piece right here to attach all the trees. So where it gets really thin at the top, that's what I'm doing with some smaller leaves, and down here at the bottom as well. But so far this is looking a heck of a lot better than the tree beside it. It's also pretty much about double the height, and if I were to put it in place next to the other one, and this is not necessarily final, but if I can get that in there, you can now see what this is looking like. And I'll come around the front because this is the angle that you'll see it at. I think that looks a lot better. I've just sort of put in place here 2 more trees where I think they could go, because I don't really want to cover up what's going over here, and I also don't want to put one on the edge where it's going to most definitely be knocked over. The last place I'm thinking of putting a tree, if I have enough parts to build one, is back here in this corner, simply because there's not really much going on over here, and it'll be kind of cool to have some greenery sticking through. So I'm going to keep building these 2, which to be honest is actually taking quite a while. Plop them here. If I have enough pieces, I'll build another one, and then we'll take those away, leave the stumps, and we'll start doing the foliage. And we're going to try to be a little bit cautious about how much I use. I do have a pretty big bin of green pieces, so I'm not exactly going to run out at any point, but I don't want to just litter it like I did before, because I didn't like how that looked. So here's just a better look at these trees as I'm building one. So I've started with a pretty tall base on this one, and as you can see, I just put a row of leaves interspersed with 1 log in between all of them. Some of them I am doing something like this, where I am just placing a leaf and then the log right on top of it, and I'm just using the length of the axle as a guide for how tall the tree is going to be. So I usually start fairly narrow, and then it widens up for about 1/3, and then it slowly goes narrower towards the top. So that's basically how I'm building these pine trees, and this is not my idea, I guess you would say. I did just find it online, and I've sort of adapted it based on what I saw in the pictures to fit Hogwarts. But so far so good. I think it does definitely look a lot better than what we had before. Okay, so here we are the next morning, and as you can see, I have got 5 pine trees in this side of the castle. If you kind of come down to this level, I do think it works a lot better than before. Now, originally I only had 4 over here, and well, it was feeling a little bit too sparse. I don't think I'm going to do any more over here, even in this corner, simply because this one will be knocked over, but because I want to highlight the actual scenery going around on the ground, and I feel that the trees, while they do add to the mock, they can actually take away from what you're trying to look at. So we're going to leave it at that over here. There will be 1 more tree built, and I'm going to plop it just over here in this back corner. But that'll be all in terms of pine trees. There's slight variation in the heights between them because I ran out of the axles. So I started using some flexi tubes, and some of those were slightly longer. But in any case, I think that actually works because it just shows some natural variety. In any case, we're going to move on now to some foliage. I'm going to take a quick look at what other LEGO builders typically do, because I did kind of mess it up last time, and I might even look through some of my older mocks, because I think the technique that I should go with is, rather than actually just flooding the whole thing with different grass pieces and plant pieces, is to sort of build in patches. In the sense that, like, you just have a few lilies here, you have a patch of grass here, and that actually ends up looking a lot more impressive than just scattering everything throughout. So we're going to get a bit experimental. We're going to make this area pop a lot better. So let's do that. Alright, so I'll show you a bit of what I've got going on here. You can see I'm essentially just doing these little patches here and there. One back there, one here. So I've got 3 so far. And this is pretty much the extent of what I'm thinking of doing, at least for this main area over here, because I really don't feel that it needs it, especially once you start populating it with people and activities. You know, you think right here you're going to have to put the pumpkin patch and Buckbeak the hippogriff and, you know, Hagrid and all that. Suddenly this empty space that you're looking at becomes very crowded indeed. The area over there by the little lake in the Forbidden Forest, of course, is going to be where Harry's casting the Patronus. So it's all these sort of things that I have to keep in mind, that yes, I do want to completely cover this in foliage and make it look really, really detailed, but also I need to leave room to actually make this space visible and usable. So that's why I'm going in patches, and I think it's turned out quite nice as it is. I might have to tweak a few things. I'm not really good with plants as far as things go, like in real life, understanding how or where they grow, but generally speaking, the more weedy, grassy plants that Lego has is going here, and I would like to make sort of things that grow around water around here, so I want to sort of make it appropriate. I want there to be variety in the selection of plants that I use, so the plants that you see in here are not the same as the plants that you would see along here, and I think that's what's going to add that variety rather than just plastering this whole area. But I'm just going to continue with the same method, just doing patch here, few along here. Around the greenhouse I might do something a little bit more methodical, make it look like they're growing something, but that is essentially what we're doing. And then the last thing in terms of larger plants is, of course, we had these from many weeks ago, is essentially just using these flexi tubes and making small trees out of them. So this would, for example, go right there, where it's less likely to be knocked over, and they're sort of just filler in some of these more open gaps. So for example, it might go right in here. And that's basically what we're doing. Okay, so here's a quick look what we got going on. Just some lily things. I really like this Lego piece. Obviously it's a fairly new part. I want to say it came out in the last 5 years or so, and I've just sort of accented this river ever so slightly. Now, obviously, for the same reasons as before, I've left most of it open because I'm not sure exactly what kind of scenes where I might put some larger foliage, some trees, etc. So I just want to do enough to make sure it's just not plates, but not go overboard. As for this area over here, just done a little bit. We've plopped back in that really funny tree that I built quite a few weeks ago to represent some sort of magical plant. And we've got some algae over here just to sort of also keep up with this sort of mystical look. Obviously some grass over here as well. None of it is complicated or anything, but this area is now pretty much complete as far as the mock goes. The next step will be to add minifigures, scenes, and any last minute details. The next step is to over here do the same thing, just pile on some plants and such, but it's going to be smaller details just because I feel it already looks really good as it is. So we're going to be doing a little bit more of the same, and I'll show you what that all ends up looking like. Okay then, so what you're seeing here is pretty much, apart from a few small details that I'll need to do, is essentially a finished exterior grounds of Hogwarts. You see I've added back the small trees. We've added some of these round tiles throughout all the paths. So that's what this is looking like now down in here, and I think it looks a lot better. Obviously we have the larger trees that we already had before. Moving across here, just small tree darted about. And I'll take you around to the other half of the mock. One thing that is currently still needing work is this area right here. This I'm pretty much going to leave as is, simply because I don't want to interfere with how I get in and out this Hagrid's hut. And from however you view it, you're not really focusing on what goes on right there. Courtyard, however, is a little bland. That will be worked on in next week's video. Coming over here in the absolutely bright sunlight, and hopefully you guys can see this, is we do have some plant life going on. A small tree right there. Little bits here and there. Specifically over here near water, as I mentioned before, I've sort of put lily pads and such to make it a little bit more fitting in the back over here. Another small tree and another pine tree over here, although this one is significantly shorter because I ran out of the larger flex tubes and axle pieces, so we've just got a small growing pine tree right there, which I quite like how you can see through this sort of channel gorge, what have you, between the buildings. But that does it for week 32 of building Hogwarts in Lego. Essentially today we got the grounds and the Black Lake, the water, completed, and now Hogwarts, at least from the exterior, is a completed build. Now next week is going to be the finale, and I am really excited for that. 32 weeks, 33 weeks of actual building updates, and a lot longer than that of actual time has transpired from the beginning of this project. I'm so excited to take it to a LEGO convention and to show off all the work we've been able to get done on this. But that is enough for this week's video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like and potentially subscribe to the channel. That would be very much appreciated, and I will see you all in the finale of Building Hogwarts.